You're going to notice I did not say, as I usually do, please have a seat for a few moments. This will not be a few moments. It's going to be a bit longer. It is something that every priest is required to do, and every one of us hates doing it. We're really not trained for it. We're always uncomfortable with it, and yet it is part of who we are. And that is to talk about stewardship as a priest. Not the mechanics of, but the theology of. And on this very Wednesday afternoon, sometime around 1:45, if my timing is correct, I'm going to be having my class, those future priests that are sitting in front of me, and they're going to have to look at Title 3, Canon 9, Section CB, subsection 2. All right? Which talks about many of the obligations that we clergy have, things we must do. And that's one of the things we are required to do. One of the uncomfortable things. So, am I talking about sainthood today? Yes, I am. I'm talking about how sainthood is made manifest in one of the dimensions of what it is to be holy and to be different. I want to talk about being a steward from many different directions and many different perspectives. There's a show on Saturday night on PBS, on Channel 13. It's called A Chef's Life. Have any of you seen it at all? Okay? It's a little half-hour show. It's a real gem. And it's this young woman who was a professional chef who worked in Manhattan for many, many years, she and her husband. And she always wanted to open a place of her own. So her parents have given her the money to open a place of her own. But the condition was she had to come back home to North Carolina and open it back home in an area she swore she would never go back to. And as she says, I'm learning the South one ingredient at a time as she's coming back home. But the music, there's a little theme song for the beginning of this very, very silly, funny, it's a reality show, but it's really not, as you can tell. And the words are, if you could see you as I see you. And I'm going to make that part of my theme for you, talking about stewardship, not just me as I see you, although I am going to say that to a certain extent, but if you could see yourself as God sees you. And no, you wouldn't roll your eyes as Stephen King just did. Okay? Remember, ever since I had my eye surgery, my eyesight is 20/20. Actually, it's 20/18. Okay. Yeah. It's amazing what happens when somebody sticks knives in your eyes, you know? What's a steward? A steward is someone who manages the affairs, the stuff of someone else, who takes care of something for somebody else. And in the Christian sense, being a saint, living the gospel, part of that means we are God's stewards. We manage God's stuff while we're here on earth. And we're all given talents and abilities that are unique that we're supposed to use. And if you could see yourselves as I see you, I see some amazing people, and I see them every week. I see people, I'm going to embarrass some of you now, okay? All right? And I'm going to start, Audrey, I would never embarrass you. I would never embarrass any of the teenagers. Don't worry about shaking your head. But like coming in today, he knows this is coming. As you guys are coming here, I'm watching Michael Graham outside. And I'm watching Michael getting on his hands and knees, staring at a puddle. Because Michael sees pictures in those puddles. Because God gave him a gift. He can see things that some of us who are not photographers don't see. And maybe among the budding photographers among us, a Sharon, who also, I don't see you as an attorney, I see you as a very talented, multifaceted person who probably suffers more physically than she ever lets on because of the injuries you've had. I see a young, developing, budding photographer in Abby, okay? I'd love to see your work because I know how you spoke with the passion of what you do when you're at school. I see organizational skills, Susan and Jen. I see Joe Niola, who Jim crowned as our institutional irritant, but more... But the passion he has for what he's offered the church. I see the young people in our parish, the kids I've been honored and blessed year after year to meet with and work with and to hear what they honestly, truly believe and what they feel and what they fear, to walk with them, to pray with them. I hope to teach them. I see a person like Riley who is so gifted and so smart. She does it in such a humble way, and I'm getting the eye roll, but that's expected. everything we have, and I could go through all of you right now, I really could. If you could see yourselves as God sees you, with the talents and the abilities you've been given. Everything we have is given by God. Our time, our life, our talents, our environment, our property, even the gospel we're called to minister. We serve God in gratitude and love for the gifts we've been given, and we share some of what we've been given. How much is up to you? Because it's not a matter of how much we have, it's a matter of what we do with what we have. Now, 1,000 years ago, when I was going through religious education, there was an image in the catechism we all had to memorize, and you're all going to laugh, and John has heard this last night. But it's an image that stayed with me for the last 500 years, okay? And the question was, in terms of God's love and God's grace, and our human capacity for the gifts we've been given, if you have in front of you a gallon that's filled with milk, and if you have a quart bottle that's filled with milk, and if you have a glass that's filled with milk, and all three are absolutely filled to the brim, which one is the most filled? You're all looking at me like, come on, how loud? All of them. It's a nonsensical question, right? If each of them are filled to 100%, everyone is filled to its absolute capacity. And in terms of the gifts we've been given, it doesn't make any difference how many or how big. What makes a difference is what you do with what you've been given, because all of us have been given the fullness of God's love. And all of us have been given gifts, very different from one another, that we're called to share with one another. If you think about stewardship, life itself is something we're stewards of. Life is the greatest responsibility we have. It's a sacred trust. We're stewards of our lives. And God depends on us to use the gifts we've been given to make a difference in the lives of others. You know, we started the stewardship campaign, and a couple of weeks ago, the cards went out, and they've been in the pews, and they're going to be there for a while, for you to think about. Inspired to make a difference. Take that phrase home. God put everyone sitting in this room here for a purpose. Not to sit in the room, but when you walk out from the room, to be inspired to make a difference in the life of someone else. All of us. And I'm not just talking to adults. I have the greatest respect for people whose ages end in teen. You can make a difference in the lives of others as well, because we need you to make the changes that we as adults have failed to make. And God is inspiring you to do that. We're not only stewards of our lives, we're stewards of our time. How much time do we have to do it? I don't have an answer to that. None of you do. And it takes, you probably thought I was going to go here, and I figure I have to because it's the news, all right? How many people went on that cycling trip that afternoon, and how many believe that their time would be over? And not to be depressing, and not to be cruel, and not to harbor on the obvious, but none of us knows how much time we have. I often remark that one of the blessings my father didn't have was the fact he never knew when God was going to call him home. It's become the stuff of a family joke. It wasn't a joke at the time. My dad died in a doctor's office. He never went to the doctors, ever, ever, ever. And he finally got, if truth be told, bullied into going by my mom. He was sitting in the waiting room. The doctor called him in. Now, this is not good for the doctor's practice, I'll grant you that. He stood up, took a step out of the waiting room, and he was gone before he hit the floor. That's a true story. That happened years before I came up here. But the point I'm trying to make is no preparation. The only preparation he had was the quality of the life he lived up to that point. And while some people can say, you know, he never lingered with cancer, he never had to deal with a long-term terminal disease, he never had pain in his life, all of that is true. But he never had that warning, that moment where God says, I'm taking you home. We don't know how much time we have. We are the stewards of our time, learning to budget our time and using our time for doing whatever it is God wants us to do here. Which means we're also the stewards of our health. Health of mind and health of body. Think of the stuff you put in your mind and think of the stuff that you put in your body. And this is not just a lecture on proper eating and whatnot, but think about what we put in. I get teased a lot because I eat a lot of chocolate. Yeah, I love chocolate. And no, I don't eat chocolate all the time. Every single day, morning, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I would if Joanne would let me. We're stewards of property. We bring nothing into this world. We're going to take nothing out of it. But everything we have now is gift for us to use. I remark to parents all the time, don't talk about having children. You just take care of children for a couple of years, and then they will move on. We don't really have anything, and we don't really give anything. We don't give to God. We give back to God. Why? Because of what you've been given, because you have a God who loves you. And the gifts we have are given so that we can somehow partner with God and letting sainthood be lived out in a real, live manner. All those things Jesus talked about, being poor in spirit and being meek and hunger and thirsting for justice, and all of those things that sound up there have to be lived out. So I get to talk about stewardship from a theological perspective. I get to talk about money because in our culture, money is a symbolic act. It's the one way we as a community can do the work Christ wants us to do here in this community. It's the one way we offer ourselves in service of God, of one another, and of ourselves. It's practical, and it's important. We acknowledge that we're put here to bring the gospel to all whom we meet. And anything that helps this community to function on a practical basis, and that includes the gifts of money that we use to make this community run, that is important. That's what God put us here for. Jesus had this wonderful account, and he got people to stop and think. You know, there's a lot of people he challenged, but there was one person in the scriptures he praised mightily. John, you're not allowed. Okay? He singled a person out for particular praise. Does anyone remember, all you Bible reading Episcopalians? The one person he absolutely zeroed in on and praised this person publicly. And it wasn't any of the 12 who hung around with him. It wasn't any of those guys. Anybody want a challenge? Public, and he praised. Yes, he did. But that's a story he made up. This is somebody he actually met. No, well, go ahead.
The centurion.
He praised him. The widow. Thank you. The little old lady. Okay? This person who had nothing in her. Yeah. You guys can fight later. This person who had no one in her life. Okay? And what does she do? She doesn't give much because she doesn't have much. She's the glass. But she gives to God first. And Jesus singled her out for praise. Not because she wrote a check for $5 million and donated it to Episcopal Charities. But she singled out this one person because of what little she had, she gave from God to God first, not as an afterthought. And that's a great challenge. It's something we all need to really think about and pray about. Where does God fit in to our priorities in terms of how I give? Does God get the leftovers? Does God get the first? And it's very interesting to hear conversations, because I've done this for 42 years now, and when churches give to charity, I listen very carefully. I never say a word. I will share the secret with you, and promise me you won't say anything when you walk out of this room. Because being Sicilian, what happens if you talk?
You don't talk again.
I'm sorry?
You don't talk again.
You've met my cousin. Okay. When parishes give to charity from an event, I always listen to the fact, are you giving from everything or from your profit? And I just listen, because that says something about us. Okay? Just something to pray about and something to think about. So I'm not talking to you about how much you should give. I am not talking to you about the mechanics of how you should do it. I personally, I try as close as possible to tithe. That's my aspiration. Biblical sense is 10%. Okay? I know that is not possible for everyone, but you do as best as you can. I also know me, that I am, being a male, I am lazy at heart. That's why I do it electronically through the diocese, so I don't have to think about it. I'm basically letting them do the work for me through e-pledging. But whatever you can do, however you can minister through this church to others, I ask you very seriously to consider this as part of what it means to be a saint. John is going to get up and speak during announcement time. He's going to talk about the pledge drive, which officially kicks off today. I'm not talking about the mechanics, as I said. I'm just giving you the spirituality behind it. What we believe and how we live it out is so important. And the world really needs to see in us that we believe what we say and we believe what we pray. So blessed are you who are generous. And if only you could see yourself as I see you. Amen.